much of his extant writings theoretically were not written for publication per se, but either were rhetorical notes coming together of students, or like condensed versions of notes that he would be teaching students in.
Well, that's what he did.
So, but I mean that a lot of things there's a controversy that a lot of things we might attribute to Aristotle more had to do with people in the school who gathered these ideas together.
Yeah.
But that perhaps he didn't write all these things.
No, it's okay. Yeah. But they use the title generally as Aristotelian. Same thing with St. Thomas. I mean, same thing with St. Paul. They say Paul's letters, and most scholars realize only half of them were written by St. Paul. But they're willing to call the whole thing by one name, and it doesn't lose any integrity by then. Yeah. So that you see, the Plato takes this. This is the primary vehicle for Platonic thought. This four terminology. This is what he develops. And his entire thought is an expression of this, and so too is it Proclus. And the other tool, which is then crafted, is the three terminology. A is to B as B is to C. That mean analogy becomes the paramount tool, and that comes out of Plato's Timaeus. And the basic intelligibility, of course, can be found in where we're going, which is Heraclitus. Because Heraclitus equally is understood through the eyes of Aristotle, and we'll get a completely different view of it when we take a look at what he literally said, since we have plenty of fragments, over 100 fragments of his. Therefore, we can check his writings against what Aristotle said Heraclitus said, and you can give him a grade, and you can see what kind of a scholar he was.
One thing you mentioned here, in terms of Anaximander, talking about the four elements changing to the other, the idea of the four classical elements. Sometimes when I'm studying the pre-Socratics like this, and obviously different ones of them, Heraclitus with fire, and these two with air and water, making one preeminent. I wonder if that muddies that water, because obviously they spoke of fire, water, and earth as the elements, not. Yes. Okay.
What? I'll do a little heretical. All right, little heretical. No ancient Greek saw air, earth, water, and fire as elements. All right? Because this is modern use of language. When I can get you, even in what we're reading now, you'll see that when he talks about water as the fundamental element, what he's saying is everything flows through everything else. It's the principle of flow. It's the principle of everything flowing through everything else that he calls water. It's not literally water. Because when he says, when Anaximander says that everything is water, because you can see that anything with moisture creates the conditions for life. The seed is moist. He goes on and says everything that has any kind of life has a moisture to it. When it dries up, it dies, it decays. So that's the principle. See, it's not water. It's not H2O. And the other thinkers are quite clear about the fact that it is not meant literally. It's a metaphor. It's not literal. We take it as these are the four elements, but they function somewhat like oxygen and helium, etc., and hydrogen. No. That's a modern view of elements.
No, and I understand what, the distinction on that they were thinking of these things metaphorically, but what always puzzles me is, I mean, when you think about astrology, which modern astrology really derived from, was formulated in Greece based upon inheritances from Mesopotamia. But even back at that point, they were using the metaphorical divisions of fire, water, and earth metaphorically, and to have these philosophers then point out air, fire, water as being prime, that always struck me as funny. That they would raise it above the other three.
Okay. The way in which these elements or principles are related one to the other works out in terms of 4 major analogies, which we'll get into, all right? And it isn't elemental in our sense of the word, because what we mean by an element is that certain things must remain constant. No, they have something that can be related one to other, where something flows through all of those, and therefore each of the so-called elements are stages through which a divine force moves. So, and therefore the 2 things of which we were going to look at is there are 2 forces, therefore, in nature, a condensing, and a rarefying. One up, one down. There's a way in which these so-called elements pass from one to the other till they get to Earth, but that's the same stuff is going through it, condensing, compacting, and that creates at different stages what we affectionately call the elements. But that's not the way they're reading it. They're seeing that they are certain stages, as it were, that it goes through, and as it goes through these recognized as stages, you can give it different names. But the thing that they want to count as primary is the process through the serial order. Let me give you a quote, and I think I'll give you a quote, in Anaximenes, which is, yeah, okay. Again, this is from Simplicus. An associate of Anaximander, and he agreed with him that the essence of thing is one and unlimited. On the other hand, he declared that it is not indeterminate, but that it has a specific nature, air, which differs in rarity and density, right? Rarity and density, according to the kinds of things into which it forms itself. It changes in terms of the thing it forms itself, because the thing that forms itself has various degrees of density and rarity. So therefore there are only 2 primary qualities, density and liberation, or rarity. Watch. Rarefied, it becomes fire. Condensed, it becomes wind, then cloud. Then as condensation increases, it becomes successively water, earth, stones. Everything else is made up out of these rarefied and condensing. So everything is made through processes. It's the process that's primary. When we read the stuff through Aristotle's eyes, we think of it as elements. The Greeks really believed that the basic element in the universe was water. No, they didn't. Not from this. They believe that there are processes going on, and successively through these 2 powers or forces inherent in nature as basic forces. So it goes through all of the stages which we call air, earth, fire. And therefore, you see, as I started by saying, we read the ancients through the eyes of Aristotle. That's the problem with ancient philosophy. In most colleges and universities, when they give lectures on philosophy, the professor wants to use Aristotle for a very good reason. You can quote him. He's definitional, and that makes for good tests. I mean, that's a fact. It makes for good tests. If you want to give a lecture on Aristotle's metaphysics or use Plato's Timaeus, there are very few people who would ever opt for Plato's Timaeus. Go for Aristotle's metaphysics, then you can talk about it, you can name it, you can define it, you can put it into sentences. The sentences are memorable, it's easy to digest, it's easy to check whether someone understands it or not. But if you're dealing with a complex system of analogies that operate on 3 different levels, good luck. You're not going to be able to do that unless you see it with such clarity. The trouble with this kind of clarity, however, is that when it's communicated, the other person may not be able to see as much as you saw in it unless they do the homework that you have to go through to see it yourself.